It was $3, just three, that stood like a wall between me and the future I was chasing. The bus driver's eyes hardened as he repeated the words I had already heard once. "You're short, can't let you on." His hand hovered near the lever, ready to slam the door shut. The hiss of air brakes and the murmurs of passengers waiting behind me pressed into my ears like accusations. I felt every stare, the weight of every stranger's impatience, as if my poverty was some shameful stain they were being forced to witness. My throat tightened, and though I wanted to explain, wanted to plead, the words stuck. $3, that was the price of dignity tonight. I wasn't homeless, not yet, but I was on the edge. My last paycheck had gone to rent, leaving only scraps for food and travel. I had come to this bus station with a backpack that sagged heavy against my shoulders. Inside it were 2 worn shirts, a pair of shoes with frayed laces, and a small, leather diary my mother once pressed into my hands before she passed. "When you feel lost, right?" she had told me. But no amount of ink could erase the sting of being stranded here, watching opportunity pull away with a hiss of diesel smoke. When the driver shook his head again, closing the door with a metallic slam, I stood frozen on the platform. Exhaust fumes curled around me like ghosts, and silence closed in. People hurried past without meeting my eyes. Few looked at me with fleeting pity, others with annoyance. Nobody stopped. I felt like a shadow, less than human. Just another burden someone didn't want to carry. But then footsteps. Slow, steady, almost hesitant. I turned, and there he was. A janitor in a faded blue uniform, pushing a mop bucket that squeaked with every roll. His hands were cracked, knuckles raw from bleach and soap, his back slightly bent from years of labor. He didn't speak at first, simply reached into his pocket, pulled out 3 worn bills, and placed them into my palm. I blinked, stunned. "Sir? Would you?" He only shrugged, eyes soft but weary. Nobody should be left behind for $3. It was such a simple act, yet around us the station seemed to hold its breath. Some passengers glanced over, whispering, a few smirking as if amused by the scene. But not one other hand had reached out. Only his. Kindness nugget number 1. Psychologists have found that even the smallest acts of generosity lower stress for both giver and receiver, boosting resilience, easing blood pressure, and planting calm where chaos might have bloomed. That janitor, without even knowing it, was healing 2 hearts at once, mine and his own. As the bus driver reluctantly handed me a ticket and motioned me aboard, the janitor leaned close. His voice was low, almost swallowed by the rumble of the engine. "Boy once missed his last ride home," he said. "Never made it back. Never got the chance." I don't want that for anyone. The words struck harder than the cold wind outside. This wasn't charity. It was grief transformed into mercy. In that moment, I realized I wasn't holding money. I was holding a fragment of a story, a sacrifice carved into his chest, a promise that even in sorrow, kindness can survive. I sank into a seat, ticket trembling in my hand. While the bus lurched forward into the night, lights blurred against the window as towns drifted past. I couldn't shake his face, the heaviness in his eyes when he spoke of his son. What pain must he have carried all these years, mopping the same floors while memories whispered in every corner? And yet from that pain, he chose to give. As the wheels rattled against the road, I thought about how fragile dignity is. $3 had almost stranded me, almost kept me from the interview that might change my life. The line between survival and despair is thinner than we ever admit. Kindness. Nugget number 2. Research shows that people who've endured great loss often become the most generous. They know firsthand the abyss of despair, and they refuse to let others fall into it. Their scars become lanterns for others. That janitor was living proof. Hours passed, but his words replayed in my head until dawn bled across the horizon. When I finally arrived in the next city, I carried more than my backpack. I carried a new responsibility. His act had planted something. In me, a fire I could not ignore days later. At a shelter where I volunteered for meals in exchange for a bed, I remembered his gesture. A man came in, thin as a reed, clutching his stomach. Without hesitation, I slipped him an extra sandwich from the tray, whispering, "Don't worry, it's yours." I saw his shoulders drop, relief washing over him. I thought of the janitor. Then, his 3 bills echoing in my hand. Another time, at a grocery store, a woman stood ahead of me. Fumbling with coins, short by a few cents, the cashier sighed impatiently. I reached forward, sliding the missing change across the counter, before she could blush. She turned, eyes wet, whispering thanks I never needed to hear. And weeks later, when I stepped once again onto a bus, I left behind an envelope at the ticket counter. Inside was a single ticket and a note. For the one who's $3 short, kindness snowballs this way. One act collides with another, rolling forward, gaining momentum, until it becomes something no system, no cruelty, no apathy can stop. It is a quiet revolution, unseen in headlines, but roaring in human hearts. I knew I had to return. The pull was too strong. I went back to that station weeks later, scanning every corner until I found him. He was leaning on his mop, back bent, but his eyes still sharp, still carrying that same quiet grief. He looked up, startled when I approached. In my hand was a folded letter, thick with pages. Inside was not only repayment for the $3, but also every story his act had set in motion. The man with the sandwich, the woman at the till, the anonymous bus rider who would find hope tucked in an envelope. He unfolded it slowly, lips trembling, eyes shining with a light that had been dimmed for years. "My boy would have liked you," he whispered, voice cracking. And in that fragile sentence, healing slipped through the cracks of his sorrow. Kindness nugget number 3, scientists have discovered that gratitude expressed aloud actually restores the brain-building pathways that make joy easier than bitterness. His whispered words proved it. Gratitude heals not only the receiver but also the giver, creating bridges where walls once stood. That bus ride was never just about distance. It was about humanity, about how the smallest gestures can rewrite a story. Wealth is measured not in dollars, but in moments like these, when strangers choose compassion over silence, when sorrow births mercy, when pain becomes a reason to lift someone else. But there was one more twist I didn't expect. Months later, I opened my mother's diary. The one I always carried in my backpack, and tucked between its pages was a slip of paper I hadn't put there. In shaky handwriting it read, "Keep the chain alive." I knew instantly it was his. Somehow quietly, the janitor had found a way to place his message where it would matter most. That note wasn't just a reminder. It was a command. And it's one I carry into every act I make today. And so, if you are listening to this now, remember, $3 may seem small, but kindness has no currency. It multiplies. It heals. Screenshot this line and share it with someone who needs hope today. Kindness is the currency that never loses value. And as for what comes next, stay close, because next week I'll share with you the haunting story of the forgotten child whose song silenced an entire city.